any citizens here to address the board? There being none, we'll move on to item 3, approval of the minutes from the September 22nd meeting. I'll entertain a motion. Motion for minutes.
Move approval of the minutes.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Bose, second by Reverend Emerson. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. I didn't do that. Item 4, CFO report. Ms. Clark.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Got the boss sign today.
There she is.
How are y'all?
We're good. We like your name tag.
I hope it still says something nice. I didn't look at it this morning.
All up to
Something
interpretation.
nice.
It is.
It's all up to interpretation.
That's the high point of her day.
I don't have a lot on my CFO report today, so I'll make it brief. Our auditors from BKD did join us this week. They're doing field work, probably through Thanksgiving. We did move their time frame up this year, so they should be reporting to Finance Committee on the December 15th date that we have scheduled. That will be the draft audit report to you guys. They typically report to you at the end of January, so we have stepped up the time frame. I think that timing will work out nicely. Because of the holidays, that date is much earlier in the month, so we will not have the November financial statements ready to present to you. So December works out well from an audit standpoint. That's really the only update I had today.
Okay, thank you. We'll just go right into item 5A.
Okay. So we do have September financials for you today. These are important. They are our year-end financials. The year has passed pretty quick. I think I remember doing this for you last year. I'm a little bit more knowledgeable this year. The statistics I'm going to take a little bit more time on today and focus on how we completed our year. So 12 months in, our admissions were about 4% off for the month, but you can see we had 26,284 admissions for this fiscal year. So that is how many people got admitted throughout the year for the 12 months. And we were 0.9% off our budget for the year. So pretty darn close.
I'm not kidding.
Our patient days were slightly off this year. Our case mix index, you can see we were right on for the month, but our actual, if you looked at the full 12 months, came in at 1.60 on a budget of 1.55. That seems pretty close, but that small level of acuity does make a big difference for a 12-month period. And then our length of stay does reflect that acuity if you look at it on a year-to-date basis, which is not on these graphs. So the actual for the 12-month length of stay average is 5.1 compared to a budget of 4.95. You can see that for the month of September, the length of stay was favorable. For the emergency department visits, we have a little drum roll here, but the actual for the 12 months, we exceeded 120,000 visits this year. And the actual number was 120,538 for the 12-month period. So, and in addition to that, the urgent care visits for the month was, or for the for the 12 months was 57,310. Now, not all of those would have necessarily ended up in our emergency department, but those two are complementary statistics. So a lot of them would have ended up in the emergency department if the urgent care would not have been open. So, and again, for the month, both of those exceeded budget. Our emergency department for the month was about 8% over, and urgent care exceeded the monthly budget by about 5%. Our total clinic visits for the year were 711,000 visits. Those are our outpatient clinic visits that we have throughout the community.
I'm sorry, for September, there were,
No, that was for the year. I apologize.
7,000?
711,000 visits for the 12-month period.
Right.
I said that wrong. I apologize. I need to just have a separate slide.
right.
Okay, thank you.
Don't take that.
On the next page, some of our other key statistics. Our surgeries at the bottom of the page. For the month, these continue to be over budget, very strong for the month, but from an annual standpoint, we performed just over 6,500 inpatient surgeries. We performed 9,100 outpatient surgeries. So for the year, there were 15,611 surgeries performed here at JPS.
Good.
And on our psychiatric services, again, we perform a large amount of psychiatric services. From a patient day standpoint, about 25% of our total patient days are psychiatric days. And our emergency visits from a psychiatric standpoint, this year, we were at 19,939 emergency visits.
Amazing.
So, the psychiatric emergency room is a separate area from our main emergency room.
It's still upon 10, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So that just kind of gives you a view of what we've done this year. As I started to prepare for this meeting, September is just kind of a normal month, but as you look back at all that we've accomplished this year, there's some pretty outstanding statistics and how we serve the patients in this county. So, and then you can see our employees, our FTEs per adjusted patient day. Both the FTE statistics that we look at ended up favorable for the year. And our revenue cycle statistics both ended up very strong. Our days cash on hand at the end of September was 252 days. And our net days in accounts receivable ended up at 47. Our payer mix slide doesn't change much month to month, but again, it's nice to remind ourselves. And again, this is based on the payer mix and charges. So it's not based on what we collect, it's based on the charge as the patient is registered, as they are admitted, and inpatient and outpatient. And our connection enrollment has leveled off. We did add a net 141 patients for the month of September, and we are now at 42,622 enrollees.
but we didn't have the big drop like we did
We did not have the big drop
15.
in 15.
We're still
So
steadily climbing.
we are, and our enrollment department is continuing to look for opportunities to get out to the community and educate.
And I would say that this number is gonna constantly take education, because we've had over years, people make conjecture about how many people might be below the poverty line, how many people might be willing to get care or services, and that number is always gonna appear pale to that. But these are the people that, it's episodic at times, the people that sign up for the program, these are the people that come in, these are the people that are on it. And that number always tends to change because people are coming in and out of that program. So it's hard to say this reflects everybody that needs care, because you still see a lot through your emergency room. These are the ones that we're lucky enough to communicate with us, and get in our program. There has to be two that play that. We have to offer, they have to accept, and they're in our program. So this, I think, is gonna be, when we look at educating the community, this is always a number that we have to figure out how best do we educate people and let them understand what that number really means.
Yeah, I would say that the meeting that I mentioned to you earlier that I was at on Tuesday, the connection came up, and even I could not, in any kind of educated way, explain connection. And I was trying my best to figure out how we could get someone to really talk to the pastoral group in the community that then could help convey that to membership. Because there are a lot of persons still in the community that have nothing. And so I just don't know what that is, how to do that. So maybe we sit down and talk.
Sure.
You bet.
Now, I definitely think that is a number that needs education behind it, because you got to understand what we're doing and how we're doing it and why. So we'll definitely do that, but that's a note for all of us, board, administration, and everybody else.
So, I'm now on the income statement for the hospital. September is a confusing month to look at, so I've added a couple of new columns that I'm gonna try to walk you through. Because it's year end, there are adjusting entries that we know that we are going to make in September. We hold off on making entries at year end because we don't want to skew our monthly results. And then there are year-end entries that happen because it is year-end. There are inventory adjustments. We go through with a fine-tooth comb and make sure before the auditors come, there are just certain accounting entries that are made at year-end. So we close the month, which is the left column, and the final month there under the September 2016, you can see that the month actually closed with a operating margin of a loss of $6 million. However, there were year-end adjustments that were made that created expenses of $4.4 million. And I'm going to talk about those in just a minute. But what I wanted to cover with you first is what the operating results would have been if September were just a normal monthly close, like we have had for the last 11 months, without the year-end results having had been booked. So if September were just a normal month, we would have lost about $1.6 million compared to our budget of $1 million from an operating margin comparison. So there was about a $2.7 million gap for the month. Primarily, we did have some good, very, very strong outpatient volume. So if you look at net patient service revenue, it's actually showing about $500,000 positive, but because of our volumes, you would have expected it to be much higher. However, our inpatient volumes were lower, our outpatient volumes were much higher, and that creates a collection rate issue. And because we had lower inpatient and higher outpatient, it created about $1 million issue in our collection rate. And that's kind of how hospitals function. It's happened in months before, but that created a budget variance. So that is part of the issue. We also stocked up on some flu vaccine because it's that season. That created some issues. And then we also had a contractual termination of a service contract for a piece of equipment that we decided we were no longer using, and we wanted to go ahead and terminate that contract. So all of those things combined, the inpatient-outpatient mix, we had higher self-pay mix than we had expected, and some of the expenses, some of the timing of some of the expenses created the operational variance for the month. If you look at some of our year-end adjustments, there were a couple of things that I have been trying to remind you guys and prepare you guys for during the year. So if you look back to this year-end adjustment column, and we had a $14 million adjustment to our patient service revenue. There were two items that created, and this was actually a pickup. We talked about it during the audit last year. There was a payer that we had preloaded a contract for, and we had some AR credits that we knew that we were going to have to recognize this year. And then also during this year, we worked pretty aggressively to go back through some of our cost reports, and we were able to reclaim some of the bad debts back through about 3 or 4 of our cost reports. And then we were also able to refile the 2 most recent cost reports, and we recognized a pickup from that. So those 2 things combined allowed us to recognize that $14 million. Now, that $14 million was what was going to help us offset the last expense that we were going to have to book in September for the $35 million of IGT expense that we started talking about in June. So back in June, we had booked $8.5 million down in purchase service for our IGT expense that we had to catch up this year. July, I booked another 3.5, and in August, I booked another 3.5. So I had to book another $15 million, which was offset by that $15 million up in net patient service revenue. So that had to be reclassed for the audit because I had booked it down here in purchase service. So we reclassed that $15 million and we pushed it back up here. So part of what I booked was new, and it was netted against the IGT or the waiver revenue up here. And then I took what I had already booked in June, July, and August and pushed it up here so our friends at BKD would not make that a reclass. Because my goal is for these financial statements to look as close to the financial statements that BKD will be presenting to you. So we booked it down in purchase service because that is how it was budgeted the first time around. Now for the 17 budget, we have booked it the way that I just reclassed it. But I did not want to have to explain it again and again and again, June, July, August. So I booked it the way that it had initially been budgeted. And so we're reclassing it this month, and this will be the last time we have to explain it to ourselves. And hopefully it has not created a lot of confusion. So I booked it the way I thought it would create the least confusion in June, July, and August, and then we are reclassing it to prepare for our audit.
But should we feel sad about not hearing you say this report multiple times, we could go back and archive this meeting and just listen to it over and over again if you want to.
Or I can say it again right now.
Or you could do it again.
Start back.
Whatever, I can.
No,
I
again.
can. I can say it a different way.
Thank you.
So those are the bigger
Confused
items
either
that
way, I mean.
have happened. So those are the 2 items or 3 items that hopefully that are not new to you. And those are some of the bigger numbers. Now there's one item that, if you don't have any questions about what I've covered so far, there's one new item that I do want to introduce to you that I have booked for year end. So are there any questions to this point? Reverend Emerson?
I'm good.
Okay. Wanted to double check.
You had that look on your face.
I always want to give you an opportunity. So we did book, we have booked a decrease in what we had estimated our uncompensated care revenue to be. About 6 to 8 weeks ago, as we worked through the final estimate that we would be receiving for the current year, and let me say that as we accrue for these DSRIP, the uncompensated care funds, and our DISH funds, these are very complicated formulas. There are estimates, there are pools, there are formulas based on formulas that are then split into pools that are based on formulas. And all you have 18 months ago are the estimates that you had during that current budget year. So we have done our best to estimate what we would be receiving. So when we estimated this current fiscal year, we knew that our uncompensated care fund would be declining by about 7%. We knew that the big fund would be going from $3.35 billion to $3.1 billion. That's about a 7% decrease, and we budgeted for that 7% decrease. And in the most simplistic form, it is split into 7 pools, and then we are in the large public pool, which we share with 5 of our friends. And the 7 pools change slightly every year based on what they call hospital-specific limits, which is based on very complex reporting requirements, and it's a zero-sum game. And then once our pool is set, it is based on the cost of how we report very complicated reporting requirements, and it's a zero-sum game. So we get a slice of that pie. At the end of the day, our slice of the pie came out smaller, and it is going to cost, or we are estimating that we are going to get about $10 million less this year than we had expected to receive. The good news is that we have been able to offset that a bit by some achievement on some of our DSRIP projects. It wasn't fully offset, but at the end of the day, we recorded the $10 million decrease, and we have, I think we recorded about 3.5 to 4 million of disrep from prior years that offset that $10 million. So included in all of these entries and how we ended up year end was at 27.3 million compared to our $21 million budget. So we ended our year at an operating margin of 3.12% compared to our 2.5% budgeted operating margin. Now, if the pools shift a bit and it ends up better than, you know, what we preliminarily expect, then that's great. And we'll be happy to have that. There have been years in the past where JPS has gotten a bigger slice of the pie, and we have been ahead of our budget. But overall, if you take DY 1, 2, 3, and 4, JPS has ended up with a very fair shake. I've worked with the consultants, and we've ended up right there in the center. So as costs shift, you know, the pie does stay the same.
And here's the challenge that we have, is those formulas are established amongst the public hospitals. As Sharon mentioned, we sometimes can go up, we sometimes can go down. This was a much larger decrease than we've ever seen, but we're not privy to those formulas. So we've asked our consultant to come work with us so that we can establish a meeting with HHSC that says, one, can we have greater knowledge in advance of this? Now, we weren't too concerned about this when they said, you have $3 million more. We didn't run down to Austin and say, how'd you do your formula? Yeah. So with all honesty, we hadn't been looking at that flip side, but when it reversed and we got less money, we wanted to kind of figure it out, and we're trying to figure out because our colleagues in San Antonio and our colleagues in Dallas were on the opposite, on the bump side of that, and we think part of that is because they're the common connection we can find is they're currently paying off a bond debt, and that may be calculated into that. So we're trying to figure that out as to why our numbers changed. To put it in, venturing into challenging areas here, but if that pie is that big, that pie is only going to stay that big. And there are a variety of folks that are using that funds from it. So if Parkland or San Antonio at summertime get more, then El Paso and Fort Worth and Tarrant County is going to get less. And it's just going to be that case. So it's constantly going to be shifting within inside the parameters of that pie, but the pie is never going to get or does not get bigger. So we're trying to figure out why we took such a hit this year, and we were unaware of the hit because you just get from the state, here's what you owe, and here's your situation, and here's the less that you're going to receive. So one, we're going to ask the state to give us more of a heads up to understand so that we can budget better for it. And secondly, we really want to ask them why and what changed in the calculations of the formula for us to be on this side.
When were they established, the formulas, do you know?
Boy,
Years ago.
I want to say,
5, 10,
yeah.
15?
Yes.
That type?
Yeah.
Well, it would have been at the beginning of the waiver,
Okay.
so.
Was it the waiver that this was done, or?
I believe it was. They were
Okay.
established prior to the
Okay.
DY1 calculation, but I can get that for you to be sure.
It almost appears that maybe the better you do, the less you get.
Well, you know, the whole shifting, there's two ways your costs can go up. You can see more patients, you know, self-pay Medicaid patients, or your costs to see the same patients can increase, or a combination of the two. So it could have been a combination of the two, but in a few of the cases, you know that at least the cost to see the same patients have gone up. And, you know, from an accounting standpoint, you know, the way that those costs are funneled into that formula, I do understand it. It's pulled from the cost report, it's an allowable cost. You know, they're lucky enough to be able to incur costs for a new facility, and it's part of a true cost. But on the other hand, you know, it's not good to be on the smaller side of the pie side either.
Well, and to your point, if your debt ratio is good and you're strong and you're doing what you need to be doing, you take a hit. And if our debt would grow, and what we need to do to bring that debt down and pay off that debt, you get more of that pie. It's an interesting equation. I too understand it, but it's not pleasant when you're on the downside of two major organizations whose debt has gone up, so we take a bigger slice of that pie.
I don't believe that it was an intentional outcome of the formula. That was not probably.
And I want to be careful here too, because ours is not to go and storm down to Austin and hurt our colleagues in any way or do anything else. We just want a better understanding of what the impact is in advance, so we can budget a little bit better and be a little bit better prepared as that fluctuates.
Are there any other questions about the hospital? I do have some things to point out on the other companies that I will go through fairly quickly. I will say it was a big month for a claim as well. September 1, there were 143 new employees onboarded for a claim. 118 were providers, 25 staff. So we have a kind of a new a claim structure, and again, the financials look a little odd, at least for one more month. For the month of October, they will be kind of realigned. This budget was made months ago for a corporation that looks very different today in a structure. If you look at the expense structure, we really thought that the UNT physicians would be more of a contracted model down here in purchase service, but they are indeed employed this month. So if you look at all those expenses together, it kind of comes more in line. So, you know, we will have a better revenue budget next month, and so I think as we finish out fiscal year 16, fiscal year 17 will be much stronger and in line.
Any questions for Sharon on that?
And PG, we will be wrapping up PG this month as well. There was a large entry to reverse some of the urgent or the uncompensated care revenue that was accrued at the beginning of the year, and that company that needed to be reversed out, that was accrued in this current year that should not have been accrued for. So year to date, that company's financial statements is more correctly stated over here. I did want to point out to you, although this is a small page, this kind of shows how we as a company ended up financially on your combined income statement. If you look and you add this up over here, the combined total operating margin was $18,965,000, and it's profitable. If you looked at our combined budget, it was $16,740,000. So this was we exceeded budget even on a combined basis this year with all the unknowns with PG, the startup of Acclaim, and I think that is, needs a recommendation and pointing out, so. And that would end my report.
Sharon, any questions for Ms. Clark? Okay, I think we have to
Need a motion to accept the reports.
motion to accept the report.
So moved.
Motion by Dr. Casey,
Second.
second by Mr. Powell. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. All right. Mr. Whitman, item 5B. Thank you, Sharon.
Behind tab 3, you'll find an annual request that comes to this committee and to this board representing several agreements within the county. First one is an interlocal agreement between Tarrant County and Tarrant County MHMR for the provision of MHMR inmate services at the Tarrant County Jail. The second request regards our funding of the public health services. And there is a small portion of a $2 million total budget that we're asked to contribute for RAP services. And the description is in the executive summary. Total request is for $13,647,725.
Great, thank you, Bill. Any questions for Billy Bob?
Move approval.
We have a motion by Mr. Bose, second by Reverend Emerson. All in favor, please say aye.
Thank you.
Opposed, motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Whitman.
Big numbers.
Mr. Young.
If you can get 13 million, prove that. Let's see, I'll vote for you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Wayne.
All right. So the first item is an expense contract with MHMR. We are asked and have historically, this contract predates me. I suspect it predates most people in the room. The numbers have changed a little bit, but the agreement has been in place for some time.
Nothing predates Dr. Weber.
Okay.
I remember this.
Yes,
We've argued about
I'll
it
be
for
quiet.
The preceding one as well.
So there are, and you can see listed on the executive summary, there are several areas. I do have a specific list of programs if you want that we can talk about. But several areas where our funds go to support mental health services that MHMR delivers on a countywide basis. Some of these, just so you're aware, also serve as a match that the county commissioners asked us to make as a local match so that we can bring other dollars into the community. So there is a piece that draws additional funds into our community. The services, like I said, cover a pretty broad array. We do refer people to everything that's on here. Our patients do have access to them. It's not on a per person basis, it's just kind of a flat amount, but it does benefit the people we serve as well.
Sure it does. Okay. You heard Wayne's explanation. Any questions?
I'd move for approval.
Motion by Mr. Powell, second by Mr. Bose. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Wayne.
Yes,
Item
sir.
D.
Yes, is for the local commitment alternative unit. This is an agreement that is for the inpatient beds that the state contracts with MHMR, who in turn contracts with us to offset the lost capacity at the state hospital system due to essentially a flip in forensic patients being prioritized over civil commitment patients. When I first started here, we would send dozens and dozens of people to the state hospital every week or every couple weeks, and I think it's been over 6 months since we sent a male patient to the state hospital. So that kind of gives you an idea of how that change has happened. So they contract with us. Last year, this contract had a couple of different amendments. The number went from 20 beds to 30 to 32 to 45, I think, the last 2 months. This year, the contract is at 28 beds. I don't have any concrete reason to think it may change, although it certainly wouldn't surprise me based on last year's experience. These are patients, I remind you, these are patients who are here who there's no place else for them to go. They're going to be here. So in essence, we can receive the support and the revenue to take care of the patients, or we can just take care of the patients. And it was really kind of our choice in this situation, because there isn't a state hospital that has capacity to send them to.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
I got lost. Can you explain that
Sure.
again? I did.
Sure. So the state of Texas, about 5 years ago, a lawsuit was filed on behalf of people who were in jails who had been determined to be unfit or incompetent to stand trial due to mental illness. Not that they were innocent or not guilty because of it, but they just couldn't participate in their trial. They were waiting in jails for sometimes months and months on, in some cases, very serious charges, in some cases, charges that frankly, we would not have spent much time in jail for. But they were waiting months just to get to a judge to go to trial. The lawsuit, the judge decided that that wasn't acceptable and issued an order that anybody in jail waiting for competency restoration at the state hospital be placed on a priority and be receiving those services within 21 days of being determined unfit to proceed. Which immediately then took, before you had two groups in the state hospital. You had a forensic population like those, and then you had the civil population, which is the people we would send to the state hospital. They were both equal groups. Well, all of a sudden now the judge has said the forensic people have a timeline they have to get there, and there's no judge who said that on the civil side. So all of a sudden the shift began to where all of the folks from the criminal justice system needing competency restoration became a priority. As they filled up the beds, the civil side capacity went down. The state realized that was going to be a challenge, and about 5 years ago began contracting with local organizations to try and provide some of that capacity. They do that through their relationship with the local mental health authority, who they give the funds to them in a contract to buy the beds. The local mental health authority then in terms contracts with a local
The
facility.
state gives
MHMR, Tarrant
MHMR
County.
the money?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I think now they've got 6 facilities who contract. We were the first one that contracted, actually. We were the first one to go live about 5 years ago when this happened, because we were a big utilizer of the state hospital system because of the nature of our population and the psych emergency center and the people we serve. So we took up a fairly, and Tarrant County was one of the largest remaining participants in the state hospital system. So they knew it was going to disproportionately hurt us by not having a place for our patients to go to receive continued care. And ultimately that puts us on the hook financially for the care if they remain here. So they reached out to MHMR of Tarrant County, said, we will pay you this money if you can provide the capacity inpatient. MHMR came to us and said, if you'd like to do this, we have funds to pay you for the care. If we didn't accept these funds, that we would still have these patients, they just wouldn't have anywhere to go, and we would be treating them without any assistance from a financial standpoint.
Thank you for that.
Are there other questions, Dr. Weber?
That's actually not you this time. Dorothy.
No, I know, I just wanted to shut it off, just
make sure
just
it
in
wasn't-
case, yeah.
Okay, any further questions for Wayne on that item? Entertain a motion. Motion by Dr. Casey, second by Reverend Emerson. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Thank you, Wayne. Item
This was my final agreement, and this is similar to the last one. This is a revenue generating contract. It's not an expense agreement for us. And this is a contract that also has a
Way
long
not to
history.
way not to bury the lead.
We're just saying, we like those Dr. Casey.
I forgot to mention that first and just wondered if that contributed to the conversation, so I thought I'd get that out there
We're with you
quicker
on
this
that,
time.
Wayne. We're with you.
The last two, just to be clear. So on this one, this is another agreement that's been in place for many, many years, well before my time here. And this is, while the other one is for a specific number of beds, this is a general contract for $2.2 million that supports inpatient and emergency services for MHMR patients who they know will ultimately use our services and helps defray and offset the cost of that utilization for us. So there's not a committed number of beds with this. There's not. We do identify for the mental health authority the people that utilize the services on a monthly basis and provide for continuity of care with some clinical information and those sorts of things. But this is not a kind of fee-for-service type arrangement. This is just a flat agreement that helps cover our expenses and has for years and years.
Just Tarrant County, MHMR, or?
Yes, sir, just Tarrant County. Other MHMRs have asked us, but given capacity challenges, it's always been hard to, we've never been able to help them out.
Okay, any further questions for Wayne? Entertain a motion.
Second.
Motion by Dr. Casey. Second by Mr. Bose. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, motion passes. Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you all.
On to item F. Good morning.
Okay, I'm here to present this morning, the Synthes DePuy Trauma Plating Fixation, contract. And what this contract is it's a result of going out for an RFP for, our trauma plating and fixation devices. And our surgery and purchasing team's been working with our orthopedic surgeons to, try to go to a sole source vendor or a dual source vendor so that we can, capture additional savings. And our orthopedic surgeons have agreed to do that. So by going to this contract, we're able to save $297,465 over a 3-year period, almost $100,000 savings annually. So we previously had presented the Smith and Nephew portion of this, and so now we're coming back with the Synthes DePuy. We're going to continue to work on our savings. Next, we'll be presenting, we're working on podiatry and then our spine cases. So by doing this and working with our surgeons, we've been able to save a good amount of money
We like
by
that.
doing that.
We like that.
Renegotiating the contract.
This committee is in favor of saving money. Great, thank you.
questions?
Any questions for one on this?
No, actually so we're looking at saving about 600,000 over a 3-year period.
Well, no, it's $297,000 over 3 years.
But we're saving 99,000 in
A
additional.
year, but over 3 years. it would
Okay, so
be-
that's the annualized.
Annualized is
Okay, gotcha.
99,000.
Yes, sir. I
And
was
then
looking for more.
over 3 years, it's 297.
That's very good.
He's just
Thank
trying to
you.
get more.
I was trying to get more.
Okay, entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Motion by Mr. Bose, second by Reverend Emerson. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
I thought we were speaking of something else.
Kathleen.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I'm bringing forward a contract for service for 3 sterilizers that process the OR equipment for both the main campus and for the Arlington facility. This is a 3-year contract with an out clause for 90 days. Was reviewed by the Service Analysis VAT, and we're asking for approval today.
And one thing, in addition to approval of the contract, you're also approving this as a sole source contract. We've got warranty issues and proprietary issues in terms of this company and the equipment it services.
Questions for council or for Kathleen? Entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Motion by Mr. Bose, second by Reverend Emerson. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. No report from council?
None.
No